Okay, before we actually start using trigonometry, you've got to be able to label sides of a triangle. So trigonometry is all about right-angled triangles. Right-angled triangles is what we're dealing with now. And we need to make sure we label each of the sides correctly. So the three words that we're going to use are hypotenuse, opposite, and adjacent. Hypotenuse you've already dealt with when you did Pythagoras. You should know what that is, but these two may be new to you. So here's a right-angled triangle. Which one's the hypotenuse? The hypotenuse is the one opposite the right angle. That's the hypotenuse. Now there's always going to be an angle of interest. There's going to be a right angle to tell you it's a right angled triangle, but one of these two is going to be interested to you. Either you've been given it or maybe you wanted to find it. We'll concentrate on this triangle for now. So I'm given that angle. The side that's opposite that angle is called the opposite side. And then the word adjacent means next to. So there's two sides next to the angle of interest. The one is always going to be the hypotenuse, the other one is the adjacent. So this triangle, same looking triangle, but this is the angle of interest. Again, hypotenuse, the one opposite the right angle. So I'm going to shorten it to hype, just save a bit of time. Opposite the angle of interest is the opposite side. And next to the angle of interest, the adjacent side. So notice, even though they're the same type of triangles, they look similar, the opposite and adjacent swap round depending on where the angle of interest is. Next view. This triangle, opposite the right angle, is the hypotenuse. Opposite the angle of interest is the opposite. And next to the angle of interest, the adjacent. The hypotenuse opposite the right angle, opposite the angle of interest, opposite, and next to the angle of interest, adjacent. Now just so that you don't think the hypotenuse is always the diagonal line or the slanted side, the hypotenuse is the one opposite the right angle. Opposite the angle of interest, next to the angle of interest, the adjacent. Okay, and some people shorten those to just H, O and A. So on this one, opposite the right angle is called the hypotenuse. I'm just going to put a H there. Opposite the angle of interest, O. Next to the angle of interest, A. But I might be asked, or your questions are going to ask you to tell you which is the hypotenuse. The hypotenuse is this side, and we call it the line from B to C. We just write BC. The opposite is this one here. We call it AB. And the adjacent side we call AC of that particular triangle. Okay, now you're going to have a go at the first set of questions where you are the one that's telling us one of the sides.